Danny, my mother said, waiting until every fork stopped moving. You're not half the woman your sister is. The dining room went still. I had one hand wrapped around a glass of water, my restaurant uniform still on under a black cardigan because I'd come straight from my second shift. Across from me, my sister Marissa sat glowing beside her fiancé, Caleb, while my mother kept touching the new bracelet on Marissa's wrist like it was proof of a better daughter. Dad leaned back in his chair and added, "Your sister is building a life. You just do the bare minimum and act tired." My phone buzzed against my thigh. Another payment confirmation. For their house. I looked at my mother, then my father, then at Marissa, who smiled like she was waiting for me to shrink. I set my glass down carefully. "Then she can start paying your bills." My father's face went white. My mother's fork froze halfway to her plate. Marissa gave one short laugh. "What?" But I wasn't looking at her anymore. I was looking at my dad, and for the first time all night, he looked scared. Aunt Rosa leaned forward from the end of the table. "Bills? What bills?" Nobody answered. The silence was louder than my mother's insult. For the last 10 months, I had paid the mortgage when Dad said the bank was calling. I had covered the electric bill when Mom said the lights might be shut off. I had sent money for pharmacy copays, water bills, credit card minimums, every little emergency that somehow always had to stay quiet. "Don't tell Marissa," Mom would whisper. "She has enough stress." So I didn't. I drove my old car with the cracked mirror. I rented a room from a coworker. I skipped meals between shifts and told everyone I was fine, while they sat at this table praising Marissa for being responsible. Mom finally snapped, "This is not the time." I looked around the room. Cousins. Aunts. Caleb's parents. Everyone who had spent the evening laughing politely while my parents picked me apart. "Funny," I said. It was the time to humiliate me. Dad's chair scraped back. His eyes dropped to my purse, tucked beside my feet, where the corner of my receipt folder was sticking out. Before I could move, he reached under the table and grabbed it. Before we continue, drop your city and country in the comments below. And if you enjoy revenge stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. Dad moved fast for a man who had just gone pale. He snatched the folder from beside my purse and walked straight into the kitchen, his shoulders stiff, his fingers clamped around the receipts like they were something dirty. "Danny," he said through his teeth. "Kitchen. Now." Mom followed him, without looking at me. The swinging door flapped behind them, and for 1 second, I stayed seated while every eye in the dining room burned into my face. Marissa whispered, "What is wrong with you?" I stood up. "That's what I'm trying to find out." In the kitchen, Dad slammed the folder onto the counter but kept his hand on top of it. "Are you trying to embarrass your mother?" he hissed. Mom shut the door behind me. "You're ruining Marissa's night." I almost laughed, but nothing came out. "Her night? You called me less than a woman in front of everyone." Dad jabbed a finger toward the dining room. "Because you needed to hear it." "No," I said. "You needed them to hear it." That made him blink. For 10 months, this kitchen had been where they cornered me with lowered voices and urgent faces. When Dad lost overtime hours, he called me crying from this same counter and said, "Just this once, Danny. The mortgage is short." When Mom's insurance changed, she sat at this table with pill bottles lined up in front of her and said, "Just until things settle." When the electric notice came, Dad texted me a picture of the red warning stamp and wrote, "Don't tell your sister. She's planning a wedding. She can't handle this." I believed them. I wanted to believe them. All I ever asked was that they not make me look selfish while I was helping them survive. Mom folded her arms. "Money doesn't make you a good daughter." "No," I said. "But lying about who pays your bills doesn't make you good parents." Her mouth tightened. Dad's hand pressed harder on the folder. "You volunteered. You begged. We're your family. And I protected you," I said, my voice dropping. "I protected your pride. I let everyone think I was broke because I was irresponsible, not because I was sending you half my checks." Mom looked away first. Then I saw it. A printed invoice lay beside the coffee maker, half covered by a grocery flyer. At the top was the name of Marissa's engagement venue. My eyes caught the amount. It was almost the same number Dad had asked me for 2 weeks earlier. The same week, he said the bank was one day away from starting foreclosure. I reached for the paper. Mom snatched it first. Too fast. What is that? I asked. Nothing, she said. Dad stepped between us. You are not going back in there and tearing this family apart. I looked at his hand on my folder. Then, at Mom clutching that invoice to her chest. For the first time, I understood. They weren't afraid I would stop loving them. They were afraid I would stop being silent. I turned toward the dining room. Dad grabbed my wrist.
Danny.
I pulled free. He still had the folder. But he hadn't taken my phone. And my banking app was still open. Dad followed me back into the dining room with a smile that did not reach his eyes. She's tired, he announced before I could speak. Danny misunderstood a private family matter. Mom came in behind him, wiping under one eye like she had been the one cornered in the kitchen. A few relatives shifted in their seats. Caleb's mother looked from Mom to me, then down at her plate. Marissa sat straighter, her cheeks pink, her diamond catching the light every time she moved her hand. Mom put one hand on Marissa's shoulder. Danny has always struggled with your sister getting attention, she said softly. Especially now with the wedding. Marissa stared at me like I had dragged mud across her dress. You always do this, she said. You always have to make things about you. I looked at my father's hand. The receipt folder was still tucked under his arm. He thought that was the proof. He forgot. He had trained me to send everything electronically. I walked past the table to the family room TV, the same one Dad had used earlier to play Marissa's engagement slideshow. Photos of Marissa and Caleb at the beach still sat frozen on the screen. Danny, Dad warned. I plugged my phone into the adapter beside the console. The screen changed. No beach photos. No champagne toast. No smiling bride-to-be. Just my banking app. The room went quiet as I opened the transfer history. Mortgage payment. Electric. Water. Pharmacy. Credit card minimum. Mortgage again. Emergency transfer. Another emergency transfer.
Dates.
Amounts. Names. I scrolled slowly enough for everyone to see. Aunt Rosa stood from her chair. Danny, how long? 10 months, I said. Nobody moved. Caleb leaned forward, eyes narrowing at the screen. Mom recovered first. She offered. Nobody forced her. Now she's using money to punish us. Dad nodded too quickly. Parents should be able to depend on their children. Aunt Rosa turned on him. Then why did nobody know? Dad opened his mouth. Nothing came out. One cousin near the end of the table whispered, I thought Marissa was helping them. My thumb stopped on a transfer from 2 weeks earlier. The amount sat there in blue. Aunt Rosa pointed at it. That date. Linda, wasn't that the week you posted those pictures from the bridal salon? Mom's face tightened. And the restaurant downtown, another cousin added. You said it was a family celebration. Caleb looked at Marissa. Did you know Danny was covering the house? Marissa shook her head too fast. No, of course not. But her eyes were not on me. They flicked toward the kitchen, toward the invoice Mom had tried to hide. Caleb saw it too. He stood without saying a word, walked past Mom, and pushed through the swinging kitchen door. Caleb, Marissa called. He came back holding the printed invoice by one corner. The engagement venue logo was at the top. The amount was circled. Caleb placed it on the table beside my payment history glowing on the TV. The invoice did something my bank history alone had not. It changed the accusation. Before that paper hit the table, my parents could still pretend this was about an ungrateful daughter embarrassing them. They could still say I had helped by choice, then turned cruel when my sister got attention. But the second Caleb laid down that invoice, everyone saw the dates. The venue deposit was due the same week Dad had texted me, Please, Danny. We'll lose the house if I don't send something by Friday. I picked up my phone and opened the message thread. Dad reached for it. Enough. I stepped back. Don't touch me. That landed harder than I expected. His hand stopped in the air. Aunt Rosa came around the table and stood beside me. Read it. Mom's voice cracked. Rosa, stay out of this. No, Aunt Rosa said. You brought this to the table when you insulted her in front of all of us. I read the text out loud. I hate asking you again, Mija, but the bank said this is the last chance. If we miss this, they start the process.
Please don't call them.
I'm handling it. Just send it to the joint account. The room stayed silent. Then Aunt Rosa pointed at the invoice. And this deposit? Mom pressed a napkin to her mouth. Dad stared at the chandelier. Frank, Aunt Rosa said, sharper this time. Did Danny's money go to the mortgage or to Marissa's party? Dad's jaw moved once.
Twice.
He said nothing. Mom started crying then, softly at first, the kind of crying that usually made everyone rush in to comfort her. But nobody stood up. Nobody handed her a tissue. Marissa's hands were folded tightly in her lap. I opened more texts. Mom, don't call the bank. Your father already talked to them. Dad, cash would be easier this time. Mom, Marissa is overwhelmed. Please don't mention money around her. Then I opened a photo Marissa had posted 2 days after I emptied my savings. Her in a bridal boutique, holding a glass of champagne, captioned, "Found the dress." Mom cried. Best day ever. Caleb looked at the photo, then at Marissa. His voice was quiet. Did your parents give you money for the wedding? Marissa swallowed. A little. How much is a little? She looked at Mom. That was answer enough for half the table. Marissa, Caleb said. She exhaled sharply. They helped with some things. The venue. Part of the dress. They said Dad got a bonus. I stared at my father. You haven't had a bonus in 2 years. Dad snapped. That is not your business. It became my business when you used my paycheck. Caleb reached into his jacket pocket. For a second, Marissa looked hopeful, like he was about to defend her. Instead, he pulled out a small velvet ring box. The one he had planned to use for some sweet toast later, probably to make everyone clap again. He set it on the table unopened. Marissa's face strained. Caleb, she whispered. He did not look at her. He looked at the invoice, then at the TV, where my payment history still glowed like a witness nobody could intimidate. Mom turned on me. Look what you're doing. You're destroying your sister's future. For the first time all night, I did not flinch. No, I said. I'm asking where my money went. I tapped the mortgage company contact saved in my phone. Dad's head snapped up. Danny, don't. I put it on speaker. The ringing filled the room. A woman answered, professional and calm, and I gave the account details I had been given months ago when Dad told me I needed them, just in case. After verifying what she could, I asked, was the account 1 day away from foreclosure 2 weeks ago? The representative paused.
No, ma'am.
The account was delinquent, but it was not at that stage. Mom lowered the napkin from her face. Dad closed his eyes. I looked at the invoice again. And the payment made that week? There was typing on the other end. Yes, I see a payment initiated, then reversed. A smaller payment was applied afterward. A cold silence spread across the table. I gripped the phone tighter. Can you repeat that? The representative's voice came through the speaker, clear enough for every person in the room to hear. Ma'am, the full amount you sent was not applied to the mortgage. Say that again, I said. The representative hesitated. The full amount you sent was not applied to the mortgage. A payment was initiated, then reversed. A smaller payment was made later. Nobody at the table breathed. The TV still showed my bank history. The printed invoice still sat beside it. Dad's text messages were open on my phone. For the first time, every excuse my parents had built had to stand next to a date, an amount, and a lie. I looked at Dad. You told me the bank was 1 day away from taking the house. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. I looked at Mom. You told me not to call because he was handling it. Mom's face had gone blotchy from crying, but her eyes were not soft anymore. They were calculating, searching the room for the one person who might still defend her. No one did. Aunt Rosa picked up the invoice with trembling fingers. Frank, Linda, where did the rest of Danny's money go? Dad rubbed both hands over his face. It wasn't like that. Then say what it was, I said. Mom snapped first. We were behind, she said. We were drowning. And your sister had already sent invitations to people. Deposits had deadlines. We couldn't just humiliate Marissa. The words sat there like smoke. Marissa whispered, Mom. Mom turned toward her. We were trying to give you one beautiful thing. I stared at her. With my money. Dad finally spoke, low and rough. Some of it went to the mortgage. Some, Aunt Rosa repeated. My cousin Elena stood slowly from her chair. So Danny was paying your bills, and you were telling everyone Marissa was helping? Mom's lips parted. That was the answer. Caleb's father leaned back, jaw tight. Caleb's mother put one hand over her mouth. Around the table, faces changed one by one as people rearranged months of gossip in their heads. The lazy daughter, the jealous sister, the one who never had her life together. All of it had been easier for them to believe than the truth. I turned to Marissa. Did you know? Her eyes filled instantly. I didn't know it was your money. That wasn't my question. She looked at Caleb, but he did not rescue her. I knew they were struggling, she said. I knew you helped sometimes. Sometimes? I asked. Her voice got smaller. They said you didn't have as many responsibilities, that you were single, that you could afford it. Aunt Rosa made a sound under her breath. Marissa wiped at her cheek. I thought you owed them more than I did. That hurt more than if she had said she knew everything, because she had not needed the full truth to benefit from it. She had only needed to believe I was less important. Caleb stepped away from her chair. Marissa noticed immediately. Caleb, please. He looked at the invoice, then at the unopened ring box he had set on the table. Part of our wedding was paid for with money your sister sent, because she thought your parents might lose the house. I didn't ask them to do that, Marissa said. But you didn't question it either. Her face crumpled. Caleb took the ring box from the table and slipped it into his jacket pocket. He did not shout. He did not perform for the room. He just said, I need to rethink what I'm marrying into. Then he walked out. The front door closed a few seconds later, and the sound seemed to take all the air with it. Mom rose halfway from her chair. Now look what you've done. I looked at her, and something in me went completely still. For years, that tone had worked. It made me apologize when I had not done anything wrong. It made me pay bills I could barely afford. It made me swallow insults because peace in the family always seemed to mean silence for me. Not anymore. I opened my banking app again. Dad saw the screen and straightened.
Danny.
I tapped the first automatic payment. Cancelled. The next. Cancelled. The next. Cancelled. With every tap, Mom's face changed. First anger. Then panic. Then disbelief. What are you doing? She asked. What Marissa should have been doing, I said. Letting you handle your own bills. Dad's voice dropped. You would let us lose the house? No, I said. You risked the house. I paid to protect it. Then you used that fear to fund a party for the daughter you praised while insulting me. Mom gripped the back of Marissa's chair. We are your parents. And I was your daughter, I said. Not your backup account. Not your secret. Not the person you shame in public and beg in private. Aunt Rosa gathered the receipts from Dad's folder and placed them beside my phone. I'm sorry, Danny, she said. Her voice broke on my name. Elena looked down at her plate. I called you selfish last month. I believed them. I know, I said. She nodded, ashamed. I'm sorry. One apology did not fix anything, but it changed the room. For once, the shame was not sitting in my lap. Mom tried to cry again, louder this time, but nobody moved toward her. Dad stared at the table as if the wood grain had suddenly become interesting. Marissa sat frozen in the chair that had been the center of attention all night, her bracelet still shining under the chandelier. After everyone left, the fallout did not stay inside that house. By morning, Aunt Rosa had called 2 relatives who had heard the wrong version for months. By the end of the week, nobody was asking why I had embarrassed my mother. They were asking why my parents had let me pay their bills while telling people Marissa was the responsible one. Caleb canceled the engagement party. Not because I asked him to, not because anyone forced him. He told Marissa he would not celebrate a future built on money taken from her sister under false pretenses. Marissa called me once. I let it ring. Then Mom called. Then Dad. Then Mom again. First, the voicemails were tearful. Danny, we're still your family. Then they turned sharp. You made us look like criminals. Then desperate. The bank won't wait forever. I saved every message. I sent myself copies of the transfers, screenshots of the texts, and photos of the invoice. I was not going to let them rewrite this later and call my money a gift, a duty, or some daughterly obligation I had failed to continue. A week after the dinner, Dad contacted the bank himself. 2 weeks later, Mom's newer car was listed for sale. The house did not magically fix itself. There was no clean miracle. There was a payment plan, a smaller budget, angry phone calls, and the public embarrassment my parents had spent 10 months trying to avoid. The difference was that I was no longer the person absorbing the cost. When I finally answered Mom's call, I did not let her cry over me. "You can have a relationship with me," I said, standing in the empty studio apartment I had just signed for. But not with insults. Not with secrets. Not with my paycheck. She was quiet for so long I thought she had hung up. Then she whispered, "You've changed." I looked around at the bare walls, the second-hand dishes stacked in one cabinet, the mattress still on the floor because I could not afford a frame yet. "No," I said. "You just can't spend my silence anymore." I ended the call. That night, I ate dinner alone at a folding table beside the window. The apartment smelled faintly of fresh paint and cardboard boxes. My old car was parked outside under a broken streetlight. My uniform hung over the back of a chair, ready for another early shift. Nothing looked impressive, but the rent was mine. The groceries were mine. The quiet was mine. I poured a glass of water and set it down in front of me, the same way I had at my parents' table. Only this time, no one was waiting to measure me against my sister. No one was twisting sacrifice into shame. Danny was never half the woman her sister was. She was the only adult at that table.